Today I'm going to be breaking down absolutely everything that went on at UFC 314 because it has been too long since we've had a little bit of excitement in the UFC, but last night delivered, and it delivered in a big way. So there is only one way that we celebrate when Volkanovski becomes a two-time world champion, and that is in the hot tub. Hence why I'm here today. So let's get stuck in at the top of the card and start with the biggest fights with Mr. Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopes. Now, the first thing that I will say about Diego Lopes' performance before we come into this, he is exceptionally talented. He is very dangerous when it hits the mat. He does have good offense there as well. And then, of course, we know what he can do in the striking realm when it stays standing. I was a little bit disappointed to see he didn't mix up his levels more. He didn't look to use more kicks. He knew that Volkanovski wasn't going to be looking for too many takedowns and control there for the most part. So I think he could have utilised more weapons, changed his levels more often. But on the flip side, Volkanovski did a phenomenal job of circling away from the power side of Diego Lopes. He never really let him set. He never let him got going. And that's the difference that Volkanovski really brings to the table. It's just that striking level and that IQ. It's just on a different operating system, to be perfectly honest. So when he was circling to his right into the left-hand side of Diego Lopes, as soon as he would begin to get a rhythm and get a beat, Volk would switch it up, circle back the other way, and keep chipping away. And he would do so with his patented techniques that we've seen on numerous occasions now. The inside leg kick, the calf kick, the leg kick from the outside, and then the jab, which is absolute money. And it goes to show once again that you don't need many flashy techniques to get things done at the highest level. Now, don't let that take away from the fact that Volkanovski was making phenomenal adjustments in the fight, and he stayed so switched on the entire time. And that was one of the things that impressed me the most with this performance, is there were so many opportunities for Volk just to lose his presence of mind, just to lose that composure for a split second. And one major adjustment that he made from the last fight is not bringing his head up and backing up in a straight line. Now, he did do this and he did pay the price, but he didn't do it more than once. Because if you think of it like this, if you have a habit that you've ingrained into your fight style over decades, it's very hard to just get rid of it, even if you do take a year off. But the fact that he was able to stay disciplined, dialed in, and to be alert for that danger, right hand glued to his cheek, making sure that he was exiting laterally, cutting nice angles when he was exiting rather than exiting in a straight line. That's one thing that really impressed me, was the fact that he could actually stay that dialed in for that long, because it is a long time, 25 minutes, especially when maybe you're thinking you're up on the scorecards and there's just one left and you've got Diego Lopes opposite you, who is fighting for his literal life, to change the lives of himself, his family, and probably the favelas that he grew up in back in Brazil. So there was a lot on the line. And there was a lot on the line for Volk, because there were conversations before this fight that if he lost, should he retire? Now, I personally wasn't entertaining them, because I did say, what if it looked close? What if it was competitive? What if it was a razor-close split decision that he went on the wrong side of? Well, there's still big fights out there for him. But lucky, we don't need to have that conversation, because, of course, he got his hand raised. And we need to speak to the mental fortitude of this man. To take 12 months out after back-to-back knockouts in the space of a couple of months to the pound-for-pound best, to be able to reflect, to be able to look on your life and understand what you need to do. And that was actually take a step away from fighting. Sometimes it's so easy to get caught up in this game, and when you've been at the top of it like he has, it's just all-encompassing. It engrosses you. So every single second of your life is to do with fighting. It's media, it's creating content. So he took a step away from the game, spent more time with family, spent time getting healthy, spent time getting that thirst back for training, and then he came back athletically. Of course, we know that this isn't his prime, but mentally, it's unequivocally his prime. To overcome that sort of obstacle, come back, fight those demons, make that walk, and then put on that type of performance. like I said, speaks to the mental fortitude, but the ability of Volk as a fighter. And really, is there any question that he's the greatest of all time right now at 145? If there was a debate before, I don't think there's a debate anymore, because not only has he reclaimed the belt, not only has he gone out and faced a dangerous competitor in Diego Lopez, he's done all of that by breaking the curse that is no fighter under 170 pounds has ever won the belt over the age of 35. And I said in the build-up to this fight, if anyone was going to do it, it'd be this man. And guess what? That's exactly what we have. So just to quickly reel off some opponents and matchups I think would make sense for him next, I think the Mosvar fight is the one that we need to make. I think it's the one that the UFC know they need to make, and I think it's one that will actually suit the timeline quite nicely, because Yair Rodriguez, of course, we'll get onto him in a second, but he made a call out saying he wants to fight for the title. I don't think a lot of people want to see that. I don't think it makes sense, especially in a time where we're just starting to get fresh matchups. So we don't really need to entertain that. And secondly, he wants to actually get out a lot closer to July rather than September. So get Volkanovski on International Fight Week. He knows that's a big pay-per-view. He knows that's a big opportunity to get his name back in there, because he's not stupid. He understands he's not got many throws left of this dice, and he is ready to go big. And when I say go big, I mean big pay-per-views, big matchups. And we look at his brand now, it's bigger than it's ever been. His media industry is bigger than he's ever been. On the back end of it, he's got businesses like Bang Tao MMA in Thailand. I don't know if that's super common knowledge, but he owns a good amount of shares in that company. I don't actually know the exact amount, but that gym is thriving as well. So he's got his new farm, he's got his new belt, and he's got a lot of new opportunities. So it's an exciting time to be an Alexander Volkanovski fan. And from a fan's perspective, from my perspective, that was one of the most wholesome wins I've ever watched as a fan coming into this game in, 2020. So on the flip side of that, when I did come into this game, I got told about a certain Paddy Pimblett in Cage Warriors wearing yellow gloves and orange shorts. And I watched him put on an emphatic performance and then jump over the octagon into the crowd, and everyone just went absolutely berserk. And there's this type of energy, there's this type of je ne sais quoi, as the French would say, when it comes to certain athletes. Not exclusive to MMA, any athletes. There is just this air about them, this intangible air that you can't quite put your finger on, but you know they have something different. And there's the obvious factors. Of course, you've got the accent, which is always perfect, especially for the American markets. You've got their hair, again, perfect, not only for a wider audience to identify someone to something signature like a blonde wig, but you also then have a good marketing ploy. You also then have something you can sell on your websites. There's so many intricate levels of Paddy Pimblett's brand, which is phenomenal. But all of that's good. But the biggest question is, how well do you fight? Because that really dictates the narrative. You can have cool marketing teams and nice content and be a funny guy and have a funny voice, but are you winning fights at the highest level? And so far, no one's been able to prove him wrong. And when I say prove him wrong, he believes he's the best fighter on planet Earth. He will tell you that he'll pick Ngannou up and drop him on his head. Now, do I think that's a matchup that we need to see next? No. But it speaks to the level of confidence of this kid. And I've been fortunate enough, I'm sounding like Dana White using kid and everything. I've been fortunate enough to spend some time with Paddy in Liverpool. I've been fortunate enough to spend some time with him in London, going around Camden Market. So I've been able to see what he's like behind the scenes as well. And what you see is what you get. Exactly what you see in front of your camera is exactly what he is in real life. And you have to remember that this is nothing new for him. Michael Chandler's been around the block and he's nearly 40 years of age. Been in Bellator and been in the big shows and been in big matchups, but Paddy's been doing this. He's been doing this. It may not have been the UFC in the last 10 years, but Cage Warriors, selling out arenas, getting the whole of Liverpool down and cheering his name. I hate to make the comparison because it's just the obvious one, but there really hasn't been anyone that's done that since the one who shall not be named Mr. Conor McGregor. There really isn't. And I know it's an obvious comparison to draw, but when you look at the noise that he's making, when you think about the fact that I can walk down the street and not a single Tom, Dick or Harry really knows who John Jones is. They just don't. I'm just telling you the facts. In the UK, people don't quite understand how small this sport still is. And we've now had multiple champions. We've had Michael Bisping. We have Tom Aspinall. We've had Leon Edwards most recently. But no one knows anyone. No one knows what the sport is. But people know who Paddy Pimblett is. People come up to me and they say, that one with the hair, is that UFC? That's the type of conversation that people used to have about McGregor. Oh, the Irish one with the tattoos, that kind of thing. Yes, that's when you know that he's gone into the mainstream. And he's been mentally prepared for that ever since he was a teenager. Quite literally. So when he came out yesterday, I said on the live stream that some people just have this ability to turn up and show out. And he has that. He has that. Because there's a difference. You can turn up and be exciting every time, but exciting can get you knocked out in the second round. And that's the side of things that Michael Chandler falls on. Yes, he's exciting. Yes, he's had a legendary career of massive fights and big paydays and multiple organizations and championship belts and a lot of admiration, sure. But he has taken those losses. And that's not to speak down on what he's done throughout his career and his tenure in the UFC so far, but there's just a different conversation when you're talking about champions, when you're talking about people that no one's been able to crack the code. And you can look at Paddy Pimblett and think, yeah, he's not the cleanest on the feet. His takedowns sometimes look a little bit funky on the entrances. Yeah, his tempo and his speed looks a little bit off, but didn't we say that about Dricus du Plessis? And you could say, yeah, well, Dricus had an extensive kickboxing career and he was doing it since he was a kid. 100% true. So even though it does look funky, he had incredible pedigree, and that's something people don't speak about. But the same age that Dricus du Plessis started kickboxing is the same age that Paddy turned professional in mixed martial arts at basically the age of 16. So he's been doing this. He's been doing this. So when he walked out last night against Michael Chandler in the biggest fight of his career, he knows how to turn it on. And we saw the best, most evolved version of Paddy Pimblett we've ever seen. And one thing that I have to speak to is his game planning. And this is something that even me, who's always been the first one to say how far I actually think he'll go, how legit I know his ground game to be. I've seen that firsthand. And how confident he is. Again, seen that firsthand. But the one thing I didn't quite give him credit for was the IQ. That was always something I overlooked to a certain degree. And I won't overlook that anymore, because the game planning of his team and himself and his ability to go out and execute a game plan was way more impressive than I've given credit for the entirety of this journey in the UFC. I knew he was good. I knew he could go to the top. I didn't quite realise how impressive he was from a cerebral sense. We saw it against Bobby Green. He was a lot more meticulous, beat up the leg, waited for the mistake, then boom, took his shot. But this was just different. This was the step above. He did a phenomenal job of mixing up his targets, using his hands when necessary, then integrating his kicks, which he does phenomenally well. Always kept Michael Chandler guessing, always kept his hands busy, and then picked the right opportunities to layer up his attacks, add his combinations, and add the second phase and the third phase. But Paddy Pimblett almost has his own phase one, because sometimes he'll just enter and he won't let off the gas, and he'll just keep that snowball rolling down the hill, and he's a very tricky person to stop. I've been telling people this. They don't understand. Athletically, he's not like most people. Just isn't. I think of Lonnie Kavanagh when I say this conversation. I'm not saying they're the same fighter. I'm not saying there's a ton of similarities by the way that they navigate inside the cage. But the reason I say that is because he's just a different type of athleticism that people could quite comprehend unless they saw it in a training facility and then they realize, majority of people don't move like him. Majority of people who are 6 foot in the lightweight division can't really pull off flying triangles. They can't really jump in, switch kick, then go into their spin kicks, then go uppercuts, left hooks, level change on a dime, get the takedown. They just can't do that. They just can't do that. Not even that they don't have the skill sets. Often that's the case, but it's not always they don't have the skill set. Some people just don't have the athleticism to do that at the highest level and then to execute it against the guys that are the best in the world that are trying to take your head off. But he has that one setting, and once he gets in that, it's very, very hard to stop. But he did a great job of timing when to use it. And when he did use it in the finishing sequence and he got the takedown, he was just relentless, constantly hunting for submissions, because Paddy Pimblett is exactly what you want to see in a grappler. There's only very few of them in the UFC, to be perfectly honest. There's very, very few of them. Very few people who will actually do the remaining. Look for a submission. Multiple if necessary. If it's not there, look for damage. If the damage doesn't give you separation or the submission, you go to a sweep. If the sweep doesn't give you a better position or the submission or the damage, then you stand up. Pretty much in that order, pretty much every single time. There's very few people who can do that. He does that phenomenally. And he's constantly looking for damage, constantly looking for elbows from every position. And now they've got 12-6 involved. It's completely changed the game for good back takers. Completely changed the game. I watch Ashley Grimshaw say this every single week in training. Constantly looking for the 1%. And it's where can you inflict most damage. And a position that you can now as well, 12-6 from the back. We saw Wesley Meyer do this fantastically well in Cage Warriors, and we've seen people like Paddy do this. And I feel like people along the lines of Aljamain Sterling, once they start integrating these sort of weapons into their arsenal, you shouldn't be looking for submissions in the UFC. You shouldn't be looking for them, because people are so good now. They know how to defend submissions. They're so well conditioned that they can fight it for longer. So it's a very, very difficult sport now to just set up a rear naked choke and lock it up. No, you have to get them to give it to you. Mike Ekendeo, day one, ground damage master. Do not chase the submission. Let them give it to you. And that's exactly what Paddy did. And even though we're talking about a fight where he got the TKO stoppage, in another world, Michael Chandler turns belly down, Paddy gets the rear naked choke with the bombs landing at the same time, and we're talking about a submission win. Flawless. Absolutely flawless. Took the dominant position, landed the elbows, got the damage, and then got the third round TKO. And if you were wondering where my prediction went, go and check the record books, because it was exactly that, third round TKO. Because there's certain intangibles with fighters, like I mentioned at the start of this, that not everyone has. And showing up under the brightest lights is a very, very rare commodity. Very rare commodity. In the UFC, even rarer. And you get very few opportunities to do it. So you best hone that skill, and you best show up when the lights dim and they go bright in the middle of the octagon under the banner of the UFC. On a pay-per-view event like UFC 314, and that was the breakout moment for Paddy. They took him over to America. They built up the experiment slowly. They had him in the apex. They slowly built up the competition. The Sean O'Malley route, we've seen it before. His paycheck starts to build as the competition starts to build. Then he starts to get some good matchups, and then he gets his opportunity. He gets his opportunity to go in front of the American crowd on a card like Miami and show out. And best believe one thing, no one will forget that performance anytime soon. Yes, there'll be haters that say Michael Chandler's 2-4. Yes, they'll say he's the best part of 40. Yes, they'll say he's relatively one-dimensional in his approach. And I'd agree with all of those factors, but it doesn't take away from the fact that he's competed with the best. He always shows up. He's a physical specimen, and he's not a mug you can just steamroll. But that's exactly what Paddy did, so he showed his level. So to conclude on that, there's really only a couple of names. He said it himself. He never calls out names, but he knew that he had to this time because we're talking real big matchups. We're talking the Dustins, the Justins, the Armands, but the big one, Charles Oliveira. And I'm going to give you a hot take, and you can come back to this when I'm inevitably correct, because I've just watched this fight game play out too many years now. I've got too many patterns to recognise, and what I'm realising is people deal with emotion. So when I tell you that Paddy Pimblett will likely fight for the lightweight title next, a lot of people are going to be upset with that, and a lot of people are going to refute that. But what you need to realise is the likelihood of maybe Belal getting a win, or JDM getting a win, at welterweight, winning the title, Islam Makhachev going up, and a vacant lightweight title with Ilia Topuria and Paddy Pimblett, the biggest matchup to make in the UFC, in the Bernabeu/Anfield. I mean, come on. The story does not write a better script. You've got the entire narrative of the hand sanitizer boy. You've got all of the media to run from the build-up when they had a kerfuffle at the Fighter Hotel in London last time. You've got the fact that you've got all of the tweets back and forth over the years, and the fact that neither man has lost inside the UFC. And here they are. They come to the crowning moment, and they've both proved the doubters wrong in different ways and in very different fashions. But guess what? They've ended up in the exact same place, looking for that lightweight belt. Should it be Charles? Not really. Not really. Let's freshen things up. You know, we're in a world where the 170 pounds division has just been revived. The featherweight division, to a certain degree, has somewhat been revived. Let's keep things moving. Let's make Ilia Topuria versus Paddy Pimblett in the biggest fight you can make right now. Yes, we can talk about John Jones. Yes, we can talk about Tom Aspinall. But the best or worst case scenario only ends with one or two more fights for John Jones. Ilia Topuria has not even touched 30, and Paddy Pimblett's just turned 30. The prime of their life. The two biggest, most active stars, really. Now, you can dispute that all you want, but I'm telling you that from a perspective of someone that chases where the attention goes, and the attention goes to Ilia Topuria and it goes to Paddy Pimblett. I don't know what else to tell you. It really is as simple as that. So I think when it comes to the matchmaking, that's where it should go. So let's round this off by looking at the last couple of fights, maybe not in quite as much detail. Yair Rodriguez, a very good performance, I think. The reason I say good is, of course, it wasn't quite as elaborate as we're used to seeing. Maybe it wasn't quite as active as we're used to seeing. But that's a very legitimately dangerous test in Patricio Pitbull. And sure, of course, he's past his athletic prime. But he's very, very viable as a contender in that featherweight division, even at this age. And the thing that impressed me with Yair Rodriguez was actually the fact it was a little bit more dialed in. It was a little bit more game planned. I think what I said in his last loss was he's got all the skills and the attributes to become a champion and to beat all of the best guys. He just seemed sporadic, which is good in some ways, and you want that controlled chaos, but you also want a game plan when you're going out against the best guys in the world, because you have to start playing probabilities. You can't just go out there and sort of throw everything at the wall and hope something gets a submission or a knockout, because these guys are too good for that. So I think he showed a good ability to use a game plan and just use smarter sequences and techniques to get a win, beat a top guy, keep the momentum going and kick on. That's something Yair Rodriguez has not always been able to do, is get some momentum and put some consistency together. And I think that's really what he needs in his career, especially at this age now where he's just kicking into his physical prime. And I mean, we actually saw that as well. we saw that in regards to his physique, and it just looks like he's rounding out his mindset to go with the physical attributes he's always had. And that's a very dangerous man, because when he's understanding when to use his strikes and how to mix up his targets and his level changes, that's a very scary person to have in front of you. And Diego Lopes is the man I think you should stand in front of next. Diego Lopes or John Silva. Possibly you keep the Diego Lopes one, just because there is a fun and a big narrative, in the hopes that you've got two fresh matchups with John Silva or Yair Rodriguez, should either man get the win. They face Diego Lopes, and then you can see where you go from there. A lot of fun things to do at 145, and now a lot more fun things to do at 205. So to sort of touch upon Dom Reyes before we get on to the last one on the main event, and where I'll round up this video, the John Silva and Bryce Mitchell. But Dom Reyes coming off a 4-fight losing streak, knockout losing streak, goes unbeaten throughout his career, has the closest decision in UFC history with the #1 GOAT, one of the most controversial decisions of all time. Now, are there closer fights out there with less high profile names? Possibly, but I don't know what they are. That's my point. So Dom Reyes has to deal with his first ever loss, and it was that, and then goes on the back of 3 knockout losses after that. I mean, that's really, really difficult to come back from mentally. Once you've climbed to the top of that mountain and then you've come against a generational great, the percentages of getting a title shot are so finite that once you've had one, the chances of getting another one diminish exponentially. Exponentially. So to then suffer multiple devastating, potentially career-altering knockout losses. Side note, the knockout to Yair Rodriguez was one of the most blood-chilling knockouts I've ever seen. The way that spinning elbow landed and Dominick Reyes' lifeless body landed on his head and his neck looked like it was made of rubber was when the sport became a lot more real for me as a new fan. So the fact that he's gone out there and suffered that, made that walk, and is now on a 3-fight winning streak, knockout, knockout, knockout. That's nothing short of remarkable. That's one of the greatest comebacks, and I don't say this lightly, one of the greatest comebacks, despite the fact if he gets the belt or not, I've seen as a UFC fan. It really is. When I look at that situation as an all-encompassing mental battle to face as an athlete and just as a person, not as Dom Reyes, the 205, a number 5 ranked and lost to John Jones, not as a D1 defensive linesman, not as this incredible fighter, but just as a person to overcome that is so impressive and speaks to the mental fortitude of Dominick Reyes, which has to be commended. Because Dustin Jacoby has proven his worth in Glory Kickboxing. I don't need to tell you that he's already fought Alex Pereira and has been in there with some of the very best, and has beaten some of the best inside the UFC as well. Knocks him out. Anthony Smith, arguably the most experienced light heavyweight in the UFC and potentially of all time. The amount of professional fights that man has had throughout all of the different organizations. And then to go out there against someone as talented as Krylov, who's an absolute menace in his own right, legitimate finisher, whether it's with the knockouts, whether it's with the submissions, he's always a threat. And then the actual execution of the technique to be floating backwards and boom, stinging with a left hook, in which was essentially the first exchange of the fight, looking like a prime Conor McGregor. I mean, my goodness. Honestly, I can't remember this time I was as impressed with a fighter. And I say that on a card where I'll say The exact same thing for Alex Volkanovski, because this wasn't just a card with good fights. This was a card with feel-good moments and mental mountains which were overcome by multiple people on this, which is a good place to wrap up with the last fight on the card. I mean, where do I even begin with the fighting nerds? I saw MMA Guru write a tweet. He said, that's the last time I'll ever bet against them. Their shots just have 10% power on people. They seem to finish any choke they want, and everyone gets 20% less powerful when they face them. And I couldn't have said it better myself. There's just this mythical aura around the fighting nerds right now that transcends into the cage no matter the opponent. Yes, they're phenomenally talented, and yes, they're executing these skills and, for lack of a better word, meme farming capabilities inside the UFC. It's the fact that they're all doing it back to back to back to back against the very best. Bryce Mitchell is no mug. People will say a lot of things after this fight, but he is no mug. I will not be told otherwise. Now, I will get on to what I thought of his performance in a second, but I've seen him out there with the best. I've seen him get very impressive performances. Yes, I've seen him in there with the likes of Edson Barbosas of the world, who's still as relevant as ever. So I know how good he is, to be perfectly honest. I know exactly how good he is, which speaks to the performance of John Silver, because there was a lot going into this. There was a lot of animosity or hype or promotion, whatever you want to call it, but there was a lot of attention and there was a lot of pressure. They all just deal with it so well, and it's almost as if you just step into the room of the fighting nerds, and sure, they'll give you their systems and they'll give you their time and their brotherhood, but they'll give you this unwavering belief to just go in there, fight your fight, be comfortable, be loose, be present, and be just better. And that speaks to the fact that Michael Oleksiejczuk went out there with another good performance as well, who's just rocked up at the fighting nerds. And it really has become an absolute hotbed. And obviously they're doing phenomenally on social media as well. So the whole group I'm just a massive fan of from start to finish. But the actual fight itself from John Silver was nothing short of impressive. To go out there, be safe, be sensible, be calculated. Again, like I always like to say, controlled chaos. And then to finish it with a ninja choke. I actually said to myself earlier in the fight when he went for it, I went, you're not getting a ninja choke on Bryce Mitchell. He's too savvy. He's too savvy in that position. Usually with someone that's grappled so many reps at a decent level, they're too savvy to things like ninja chokes. But maybe that speaks to where his wrestling should be. I don't think he's added that level of high-level wrestling quite yet that he needs to really compete with the very best and integrate his grappling. I just don't think it's where it needs to be. At that weight class, it just isn't. He needs to set his shots up better. He was just shooting nakedly from far out, looked tired early. And as a fighter, I like Bryce Mitchell. I do. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to be critical and I'm going to have to be honest, but I'm being real because I want to see him improve and I want to see him get back out there with the very best. He has to go and train at a gym around consistently higher level coaching and training partners. It's just a simple fact. Has to be taking strength and conditioning more accurately, has to be taking recovery more accurately. Gone are the days where you can skip out on those 1%. I'm not saying he can't compete with the best guys in the world, but I'm telling you he's putting himself at a severe disadvantage by not doing those things. I think he should go away, look to just take a year. Still young, doesn't need to rush anything. Take a year, recover the body, recover the mind, go and find a team to go and work with. He doesn't have to uproot everything. He doesn't have to go and change everything about his camp. Just go and train at some different gyms. Go and spend 6 months or 4 months working on your wrestling, where you're just doing it kind of every day, working on your striking. working on just your ability, maybe not to just sparring hard rounds, but getting good looks with good guys, getting higher paced rounds in MMA, because he looked tired early. I don't know if he had an injury coming into it, potentially, but I think it's a culmination of factors. I don't think it's just one thing. I don't think it was the fact it was just a skill deficit. I think there was elements of that, but I also think there are gaps that can be filled. I think there's just improvements that he can make on his recovery, on his strength and conditioning, on his overall game, sure, but any fighter could say that, but especially in his offensive wrestling. Just wasn't setting those shots up well enough. He really wasn't. So I don't think it's the end for Bryce at all. I just think he has to revise his strategy. That's what I would say. But the main takeaways, Paddy steals the show. Volkanovski just goes out there and becomes your favourite fighter's favourite fighter all over again in what has to be the most feel-good moment in the last however many years. And then Dominick Reyes goes and puts on a flipping all-timer performance. And then you've got John Silver, who once again just proves us you can't bet on the fighting nerds. I mean, what more could you possibly want from a pay-per-view? I feel like the spark really came back. It got my energies up, got my blood pumping. So I'm excited to see what's next. Let me know what you got going into your next matchups for all of the wins on the fight card. Let me know what you think should be next for Paddy, what you think you should be next for Volk. I'm tripping over my words. Jesus Christ, we did 40 minutes on a straight, just in the jacuzzi in the hot tub, all off the top of the dome. But I'm grateful if you made it this far. Always enjoy chatting to you. Had a lot of fun watching it, and as always, keep it casual.